Okay guys, I'm going to start. Welcome. So this presentation is about Webform. The title has gotten really simple. It's about Webform, 8.x, 5.x, and the most significant thing is about Webform for Drupal 8, and it's a new version. I'm going to start going into it. First, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Jacob Rockowitz. I'm a Drupal developer. I specialize in using Drupal for building CMSs, like large websites, and also for data management. That's kind of why I'm interested in Webforms. It's a tool to collect data. And my goal is to get you to adopt Drupal 8, to get people interested in moving to Drupal 8. More people need to start migrating, and Webforms was a very important module for the community to have available for D8. So let's start off with what is the Webform module. I think some people are very familiar with it, but I want to kind of set a definition. And it's a form builder and submission manager. That's what it does. It's a form. You build a form and you collect submissions. That's what the data is coming in. And to make it really simple, and this is really for me to set the tone, this is what it's about. It's building a simple form, and it's collecting a submission, and it's getting that data. And that's the sole purpose of this module. Now, there's some history to this version of the module, because it started out as what I called the YAML Form module. I was working for Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. They're one of the largest early adopters of Drupal 8. They launched on a 30,000-page site on a beta version of Drupal 8, and Webform module wasn't available. We needed an MVP solution to build forms. So we went with basically saying, enter some text and we'll render a form and collect some data. And I'll show you how that kind of worked, but it was called the YAML Form module. And this is in 2015 we launched. And then in 2016, around Christmas, actually, right at the beginning, I created the YAML Form module and contributed that to the community and spent all of last year working on that module. And towards the end of the year, there was a discussion. It's not a great name, and the decision was made to move it into the Webform namespace, and there was no movement in the Webform module in terms of porting it, because it was a lot of work, and there was a lot of duplicate effort happening on my end. And QuickSketch decided to let me move this module into the Webform namespace, and that happened at the beginning of this year. Anyone using the YAML Form module, there's a migration path to go from YAML Form to Webform. And the important distinguishing thing was when I started YAML Form, it was developer-centric. It actually was, quote, a lightweight developer-centric solution. It's definitely no longer a lightweight module. It's pretty robust with a lot of functionality. The Webform module that I'm now focusing on is for developers still and site builders. So I really am trying to cater to developers. I think that's important in the Drupal community. I think people say don't. I think developers build forms and they do a lot of the custom functionality, so it's important to keep them in mind. To say what is a YAML form, this is what a YAML form was. It's basically a form serialized into a YAML file, and it's just plain text. This just describes the form that I just showed a minute ago, a contact form. It just describes the 4 fields and says what the text is, and you can just type out a form, and that's how Sloan Kettering launched their site. And really, what's a web form? For me, it was just putting a UI on top of that. It's just a UI where you can create these fields, drag and drop them, and decide which fields you want on your site. I'm going to do a demo. This is a very simple intro demo. I have videos in the deck so you can use those to get familiar with it. Sorry, I'm going to have to focus on this screen. So I've installed the Webform module. I like using the contact as an example. I'll show you the form. It's a very simple form. The use case I like to describe is I just want to add a company field. I want to customize this form and add company. So you can go into the UI and say add field. You can filter, get a text field, add element, just call it company. You do not have to go and customize all these defaults. I'm actually going to collapse them for now. And I've added a company field to the bottom of the form, and I'm going to just show you the field. And in this demo, I kind of made a mistake because I labeled it company. It's not required. It should be your company. It should be moved to the top. And I want to kind of now show you kind of this back-end side of it where you can get into the source code. Now, we could drag it up, require it, edit it. The other option, and this is optional, you can turn on and off this feature. You can get into the source code of the form and quickly copy and paste. I can cut it. I can move it up. Change the label. And what's very powerful about this feature is developers can quickly write out forms. This is just Drupal's form API written out. And if you're a developer, it's all common stuff that you've used, and I'll hit save. Now I'm going to go to the test tab because it actually now shows you the form, and I've made the change. And this test tab is very powerful. It actually generates test data with reasonable defaults. You can actually control what test data is going to fill out. You'll see sometimes for names I have the Beatles listed out, and at some point I'll show you the settings for that. And I can test this form and do a quick send. And I've just generated a submission, and I just want to show the back end. Because now we show this is the form builder side, and this is the result side. And it just came through. It's the first result in the system. And you can preview your results. And I offer 4 options where you can get a table view, which is useful if you have very long forms. This is a quick way to look at a lot of data quickly. And then there's a plain text view, which is really what gets sent out in some emails. You can send HTML or plain text, also SMS. And then finally, this is the raw data. This is the data that's going into the database. And it just gives you an idea of how the form's structured and what the metadata is around it. Moving forward. So let's context what's new in this module. So this is a new version. It's a complete rewrite. And I think one of the most important things is it's based on Drupal 8, so it's all object-oriented code. I just demoed the editing the source. That's a big feature. That's one of my favorite features because it opens up a lot of possibilities where you can build forms quickly. There's a whole bunch of new elements and settings available. That's been extended a lot. There's also composite elements out of the box. Composites means like an address field where you can collect a street, city, state, zip, country in one element. There's also support for multiple values, which is similar to Field API where you have to add more, and I'll demo that. And then there's these things I'm doing with examples and templates to help people get started to understand what's going on. Here's an example of all the elements you have available, how to build a wizard. And then there's another system where you can do templates, where for your team, if you guys are building donation forms, you can create a donation form template that can be copied over and over again and use it to get started. And it makes a huge difference. This is a pattern in the Webform module. We clone things, we copy things. That's the best way to get started, and the template system just makes it a little easier. Another enhancement in the admin UI, you can flag submissions and add some notes to these submissions, and that's a new feature. And then everything's extendable plugins, so I'm going to walk through that, but everything you can kind of extend, enhance elements, how emails are sent. And I'm working really heavily on enhancing the documentation, taking some different approaches to providing documentation. To address what's missing, right now one of the big things is views integration, which a lot of people are interested in. Someone has started that project, and it's a separate contrib module called the Webform Views module, and it's getting views working. Advanced conditionals, this was a complete rewrite, and I've just held off starting that process of building a whole conditional logic engine. One of the reasons right now the form module is using States API, which is included in core. And I'd rather stick to what's in core than start a new system, because core needs to fix its state system. So I'm holding off on getting advanced conditional logic. And just to explain the issue, core does only client-side conditional logic of hiding and showing fields. That information doesn't get processed on the server, so it creates some limitations. Some other things that I'm absolutely going to avoid in web forms, or I'm trying to, is having statistics built in, where you have analysis and tracking. I'd rather that be done in a separate module. I think the focus should be on building forms and collecting data. And analyzing the data, there's lots of better tools out there and more opportunities. I even think there's third parties that can do a better job. Migration is a big issue. Some people are working on a migration from Drupal 6 to Drupal 8, but there's no Drupal 7 to Drupal 8 migration. At the same time, a lot of people don't need a migration. They just need to get their forms over and their data. They can leave in the old system and start over. But people should start helping out. And the form builder module, a fancy drag and drop UI, is not available yet. That might be in a much later phase, and there needs to be more contributors. People need to start taking on some of these tasks in separate projects. I think it's important to discuss who built it, because I built the Drupal 8 version, but I really need to make a note here to say Quick Sketch deserves a huge amount of credit. He's been maintaining this module for 10 years and built this whole community of people building web forms. And he's moved on. This module, the Drupal 7 version, which is a completely different code, is now available on Backdrop. I think I want to call that out. If people are still interested in using their Drupal 7 sites and have a heavy web form setup, they might move to Backdrop as an option. And these are the numbers of this module. These are stunning. 500,000 sites are reporting using the Webform module. That's 1 out of every 2 Drupal sites. And I'm only 1% of that right now. I've got like 4,000 installs. But it's really stunning the amount of work they put in to build this community. And the number of downloads competes with any form builder out there that releases statistics. So just to describe why I'm doing this, why I pursued this project. I wanted to contribute something I think that's very common. Like, I've worked in the community for the last 7 years, and I wanted to give something back. And for me, my way of working, I like focusing on one project. It's just I've been working for Sloan Kettering for 16 years on one site. As long as I can see forward and keep engaged, feel engaged with the project, I can keep going with it. And this project kind of fits that niche for me, that special spot where I have a vision for this module going on for years because I can just see how to progress through it. And I really think Drupal 8 needs a form builder solution. That's a really important need. And I think everyone needs a form builder solution. I almost phrase it as open source needs a good form builder. I think that's important in the community, that people have a tool to build forms and not any lock-in. And they can do anything. A client comes to them with a requirement and they can address it. So why should you use the Webform module? I kind of, I mentioned it's an open source solution to collect data. And I think this is important also, like, to really further define the use case. It's to build a form, publish the form, get it on your site, collect the data, send some confirmations and notifications, review the results, which I think is really important, and then download. And that's like the common use case of the Webform module. That's what everyone's using it for. It even comes down to these 3 points: build, collect, and download. One interesting thing, when I pursued the Drupal 8, I did a lot of analysis. I looked at all the modules that were going on in the contrib space. I came up with this other use case that was really starting to happen. I think it's happening a lot more in Drupal, period, with the REST API and initiatives. There's this distribute side of it, where people are building forms. It's not about going into Drupal. It's just about, here's a form on a site. I'm going to get the data and distribute it somewhere else, typically to CRM, Salesforce, payments. One of the features that has changed is you do not have to store these submissions in Drupal. You can turn that off out of the box and just send emails. The idea that you're going to get data and move it somewhere else is one of the core pieces I've worked on in this module, and I'll demo it a little bit more. And really, before you start using any module in Drupal, you need to look at your alternatives. It's worth knowing what's going on, so I'm quickly going to just walk through these slides I mentioned to give you some idea of what you should look at when you're looking at the Webform module, what you should compare to. I think it's always important to look at proprietary systems because sometimes they can solve your problem faster and cheaper. It just depends on your requirement. Personally, I use Google Forms for my timesheets. I would never use, build a web form to do it. I'd rather just have Google handle it. What is amazing in the proprietary space, and I think in the Drupal community we need to pay attention to it, is they're doing amazing things with the UI because they have to. That's part of their business, is building ridiculously cool UIs. Jotform is releasing a 4.0 version, and Jotform is doing a 4.0 version that works on a watch, and the UI is that simple and thought out. So it's worth looking at these options. And in open source, it's similar too. The 2 big ones in open source are Gravity and Ninja Forms. Those are WordPress-based form builders, and they're also pushing the envelope on what can be done. And the other 3 I have here, I think Form.io is the only one that I really want to point out to people where this is a solution they presented at DrupalCon last year. Their solution is a slightly different use case. If you have many different distributed systems and you need forms across all those systems, they're providing a central system that you build the forms on, and then you can publish those forms to all those different systems. There's some limitation, but if you have a really complex environment that needs form building, they're offering a really unique solution for it. And Orbian and Limesurvey are just the other big players in the open source. And in Drupal, I think it's really important to say there's contact form in core. That ships with core. It builds a simple contact form that sends an email, and it has different approaches, and it's worth looking at that. I'm not going to get too much into comparing the two, and we can talk more about it at the end. There's a note here, and Ted Bowman's not here, but eForm, which Ted worked on, is kind of getting deprecated because contact form is kind of taking over this space. And I think the one focus, you should definitely look at contact form and see if that addresses it. And personally, if it does, you should use it because it's in core. It's simpler. There are going to be more solutions. People have not ported all the other form builders over. There's like a quiz form builder, and they haven't started, but I think that's going to slowly start happening. So there'll be some other options in the Drupal community. So where do you start? This is really important for people to get about the version of the Webform module I'm working on. It's a complete solution. You install it, it works. It addresses, you can build forms out of the box. I actually spent a lot of time making sure you can go to Simply Test Me, turn on the module and be like, yep, it works. It does exactly what I need. There's actually tools to get your libraries working on Simply Test Me just so you can review the module. The installation, yes, you have to download the module. it's broken down a little bit more, so there's a core Webform module that doesn't have the UI, so you have to turn on the UI, and there's these other features I'm starting to hint at, examples, templates, even the node integration, you have to turn on these submodules. And then with external libraries, this is very important because we're building very complex rich forms. There's a lot of JavaScript libraries that you need to install, and there's a tool to do that. I'm going to show it to you. And then once again, the community is going to start providing a lot of functionality in other modules. So you've got to look at what I'm calling them add-ons. It's basically web form extension modules, like the web form views module. People are doing MailChimp integration and stuff like that. And then to get help, I really am putting a lot of energy in documentation. I'm working on pushing a cookbook in the community. The idea is that people keep asking me the same question over and over again. Instead of answering it, I take the answer and I put it on a documentation page and define a recipe and say, this is how you do this feature. And what I'm also trying to do is when someone asks and I give them some guidance and they go find out the solution, I push them to put a documentation page so we don't have to keep asking the same question over and over again. And it actually has cut down on the number of questions I get, and sometimes I can respond to a ticket with a link and be done with it. I'm doing a lot of screencasts, and you're going to start seeing that in the module. I like Drupal Answers. That's the Stack Overflow, Stack Exchange. That's a great site to get help. And then you can post things in the Webform issue queue. I would rather people post bugs than feature requests than like, how do I do this task? I think Drupal Answers, you get a better response. I'm going to just quickly, I think it's very important, sorry about that. One of the challenges is the third-party library. So I just want to show you, like I have the module installed, give it a second. I also set up this messaging system, so you get these messages that help you as you're navigating through the site, and they're actually dismissible. I'm not going to dismiss it, but it gives you some guidance about where to start, and I think the third-party libraries, I want to emphasize this to everyone, that you need to run this drush command. If you don't use drush, you should, because what it's going to do, this single command will go out and get these, I've lost count, these 7 libraries and install them in your libraries directory for you in one command and take care of the versioning. And it makes a big difference. It helps your site perform better. If you do not install these libraries, the module will figure that out and go out and point to the CDN versions of all these libraries, which is perfectly fine for development. But if you go to your status report, you are going to get a warning, don't do it on production, because basically you're depending on third parties to run your site. And you're better off having them installed on your machine. With that, there's also, I will jump around. I'm trying to aggregate and keep track of all the submodules that people are doing. I'm not 100% sure what direction I'm going in with this, but there is an add-ons tab, and it's just listing out the projects that you might do. Configuration management is a big issue, so I'm starting to aggregate these modules and say, hey, look at these modules. I want people to start using them and provide feedback in these modules, and you get some idea of what people are doing. As this builds out, as more people get involved, I'll have to rework this page if it gets too big. And then I want to emphasize the documentation. So I have done a lot of stuff on the documentation page. There's installation guides. There's even screencasts. There's a screencast basically of this presentation already available. I do want to emphasize the cookbook, partially because anyone trying to help me here, this is essential. This is made up of like code snippets, tips. I'm trying to do videos. We lost internet. What a bummer. You've got to go to the page. I'd rather not spend time trying to connect to my local phone for Wi-Fi, and it won't kill the presentation, so I'm happy about that. I will describe one of the snippets. It's a great example because one of the features missing is conditional routing to your emails. So people want this ability that if someone pulls down a drop-down menu, when it sends the email, it sends it to a custom email address based on a drop-down menu selection. I'm going to add that feature at some point, but someone asked this really esoteric. He's like, what if I want to route by language, the language of the submission? I'm like, well, I'm not going to ever build that. It's too specific. And they built, it's like 10 lines of code where it extends the email handler and looks at the language and appends the language code to the email address. And then they have this custom routing system. It's just a perfect example of how much you can extend this module. Moving on. So what can you do with the module? Sorry, I need to get it. I'm really into this concept. Anything. I can't emphasize it. You can build any form you want. And a lot of it's tied to how powerful Drupal's Form API is. The simple fact that Form API builds brilliant forms, and this module is now just exposing that API, You can build any type of element. You can customize any type of element. You can do any type of layout. And then we all know this. You get into the theme system and anything's possible. You can tweak everything. Now, where do you start with what you really can build? It comes down to examples, looking at the examples that are included in the module. There's a Webforms examples module that you should always turn on. If you're starting out, turn it on. If you turn it off, it'll uninstall the examples. And what that does is it shows you what the elements are, the composites, possibilities with layout. Gives you an example of a wizard so you can build a multi-step form. It just gives you some hints on how you might build it. And then there's some examples of some conditional logic. And there are more examples in there. And tests. I'm going to hopefully get to tests and not run out of time, but there's a lot of tests. And those are ways of learning how things are working. And then templates. I use templates in demos. Someone's like, I'm interested in building a donation form. Well, I have a donation form template. You can copy it and just start playing with those forms and using them as starter. Also, if you're finding issues, those templates are awesome for you to be like, okay, I'm having a problem with a file upload, and you go to the job application template and you start messing with the file upload field, and you can give me step-by-step directions to be like, I go to your job application template, I copied it, I entered this data in, and it broke. And this will help your team. To show you some of these templates, I'm going to actually start with the examples. I'm going to jump back up. So, contact is the only form that ships with the core module is the contact form. You turn on the examples module and you get an example, and this is dynamically generated, of every element available. I'm going to scroll slowly and only cover some of the interesting ones. There is support for multiple values. I have to slow down. This is a lot, by the way. Captcha is supported. I'll walk down. There's some, when I describe more elements, you're seeing a lot of the standard elements here, but then we get into, there's a rating element out of the box, there's signature elements, and we keep going, and you do get core actually exposed text formats, so you can introduce your text formats to users and set up custom WYSIWYG editors. I added a toggle element because I think this is getting really important in accessibility. People are starting to use it more. With file uploads, I forked not forked it, but I went in this direction of media type specific file uploads because it's not that powerful for desktops. It's awesome for mobile. So you can have a video upload field that when someone clicks upload, it opens up the video camera and starts letting them record video into your site. And that happens with all of these, which, I mean, someone actually threw this on in the issue queue and I saw it. I was like, that's amazing. Do audio recording and capture that data. And then I've done some enhanced elements where you can get button elements. I've also added this concept of other to any type of options element. So you can go in and have checkboxes and other. And there's full Likert support for surveys. And there's full Likert support for any type of Likert scale that you might want to use. And now we're getting to some of the other table select sorting elements. And that's about it. Now we're starting to see date. All the data, and by the way, all this is what's coming in core. Core has these elements, and I'm exposing them. Some of them are custom elements that I'm actually extending core and enhancing a little bit. And then full entity reference supports, and you can do entity, autocomplete checkboxes and radios. Moving back up. Sorry for the long scroll. Composites I'm going to go through very quickly. Composites are just, this is an element made up of a bunch of sub-elements. It's the typical use cases I have are addresses, and this is where the multiple starts kicking in kind of nicely because you can get these tables and collect. You can start building your own custom composites. There's an API for that. Interesting thing about the object-oriented fact that I like to bring up is, here's a contact composite. It just extends the address composite and adds some name fields to it. And that's a good starting point if you're going to build your own. A nice one, which I'm even going to demo some more in the background, is there's full support for location APIs. So you can get the exact location using Google's Map API, and in the background it's capturing all that metadata, including longitude and latitude. And you can, there's the name element. I'm going to go back up. The examples of conditional logic, I'm only going to show you one. It just shows you how it works, and you can go into the UI and see how to build your own conditions, and this shows you in the source code mode how it's written out using States API. Input maps, this is an example that I wrote because I needed to know how input maps were working, and these are just little input maps that you can customize. I just wanted to be able to test them. It also just gives you an idea. You can create your own filters for your organization. Now we get into layouts. There's two examples. There's basic, which is just, this is stuff that's in core, that I'm just exposing in the Webform module, and I just want people to know that it's there. Inline messages, basically I'm taking Core's messaging system and making it available that you can stick these messages anywhere into your form and add conditional logic to them. And there's also a whole, I'm calling them dismissible messages. It comes from Bootstrap. Bootstrap includes this. And these dismissible messages are tied to any type of way you want to dismiss them. So you could have a cookie-based local, well, no, it's really local storage, session storage, per user, or the entire site. So you can have a message where it only appears on the site once. I use it to tell people when they've updated the module, I show a message, and if once they close it, it never comes back. But then you get into Core has the ability to do inline form element layout, side by side, and I've added some enhancements to do your checkboxes and your radios and multi-columns. And then this is Core. Core allows you to move the labels around on your forms, and this is kind of nice. I find it moving the description before the form element in many use cases, that's been a helpful thing. I did add support for tooltips, and you can do table layouts of your form elements. This is a little different. This is like a completely custom table. I have this example because it's possible. I don't recommend it. Now, where it gets really juicy is Flexbox is this amazing system for CSS that just works. Every browser except IE9 is supporting it, and it has allowed web forms to have multi-column form layout out of the box, and this is responsive. It will resize when you get smaller, and for certain forms, you might need this if you're collecting a lot of data. Personally, I like the top to bottom use case, and the final, this is, by the way, the longest demo I have because it's just a lot of stuff. The final one is Wizard, multi-step wizards. You can just kind of go in here and look at it. And this is a good example why I said I did this, because I'll show you a couple of features that people might not even know. So I started going through the form. If I exit the form, which I have to do to show you, it's going to prompt me. And there's a little checkbox to say, prompt someone when they're exiting this form to make sure they know they're going to lose their data. And there's lots of nice little enhancements to do that. I'm going to hit leave. And templates are really easy to demo, and I'll use the donation one. You can preview. So this is just showing you the field. This is just, and by the way, this isn't really collecting a donation. There's no payment here. It's just to give you a starting point, some idea of how you might build a donation form. And you go in, you could hit select, and in many cases you can just hit save. It'll automatically figure out the right ID, and that gives you, I've got a donation form to work from. There's the form, and now I'm going to move on. I don't want that to start. So, web forms are config entities, and they get their own dedicated page now. You go in, it says /form, and you've got contact. That's well and good for a lot of sites, but there's also this need to put these forms throughout your site in different areas. So the question is, how do you publish this form? And you can actually turn off that dedicated URL and be like, I'm only going to use this form in blocks. And important to say, I spent a lot of time making sure these forms can be fully integrated into your site, any way, anyhow, anywhere. I haven't even done it, but I see people using the paragraphs module and embedding these forms within paragraphs. And yes, there's two big ones. It's nodes and blocks. And there's a web form node module, and you can turn that on, and then you can attach these web forms to Node, and I'm going to demo that, and you can do blocks and place these forms as blocks on your site. And then there are custom APIs. There's actually a dedicated web form element where you could just, in your render array, say, type as web form, enter the ID, and now you have a form anywhere in your site. Moving on. Okay, so start with, this demo goes pretty quick because it's really matter of fact. I have the web form node module turned on. I go in. There is a dedicated web form field, so you can add this field anywhere on your site. This is a dedicated web form node. When you turn on the module, it adds this node to your site. People have disabled it sometimes because they want different use cases, but I'm going to use the contact form as an example. One nice feature is you can pass data into this form attached to this node. This is a tricky one, but you can use tokens, and you can reuse your forms. You can have this node have custom data that then gets pushed into the form, so you could take the same form and put it on multiple nodes on your site and have it do slightly different behaviors and not have to copy the same form over and over again. Sorry, I didn't title it. And here's the form. You have the form. And when you do this, it enables a test tab and a results tab. You can't build the form here because you're building the form separately. I'm going to use the test tab to generate a quick test. And I want to show you something that's very interesting, like I put a lot of energy. It's slightly different. So I've submitted the form once here. I'm going to go to the results tab. And you're going to see only one result here. Even though we did a test before and I submitted this form once before. So what this is doing is it's tracking where the submissions are coming from and saying this submission's only tied to this node, so I'm only going to show submissions for this node. So you're able to create one form collecting data throughout your site and tracking where the data is coming from with a full entity reference. It opens up a lot of possibilities. And now you have full ability to download and view these results. I'm going to move on and show you the block, and it's also very simple. It's a web form block. Let's do it in the upper, here, second block. Type web form. I'm going to use the contact form as the same example. This also allows you to push in custom data to this block, so you can start tweaking it, and then you get all the other nice features of blocks. And I'm going to demo it. So now it's added to the front page. I'm going to fill it out with some dummy data. So this is coming from the front page. This is I'm doing this demo to kind of further emphasize how it's tracking. So I've added this. Basically, think of this as like a feedback form, and people start filling it out on your site. I've moved around a bunch. And if I go into structure and I look at it, I'm going to go to the form. We got 4 results. You're going to see this tracking kicking in. It's knowing where you're submitting the form from. So you could actually do a global feedback form where you just know what you give me feedback on the pages of my site. You place a web form block on your site, and you're getting feedback for each individual page on your site, and you can use that to get some analytics on your site. Moving on, so those are the 2 main ways. I can't really demo how to do the API integration, but there is a cookbook recipe page showing you how to do it. So what can you do with these submissions? So I'm showing you this table that's collecting these submissions, but the module provides an API where you can handle these submissions, which is, to me, sending emails the most common use case. You get the submission and you send out a notification. I call it a notification and confirmation. And you can download these submissions. And I'm going to just start showing you some more of the enhancements where I've taken it a little bit further than just sending an email. The concept, yes, it's a notification, which is emails. I've added this remote post. So this idea that you can, as the submission's coming in, you can take the data and push it to another server. You can push it to a CRM, in a JSON packet, in a post, in the background. And you still have the ability to download these submissions into spreadsheets. And I'm going to quickly walk you through that. And we can stay here. Use this as the example. So I'm on the contact form. So there's this email handlers tab. And these are the 2 emails. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but I'll just show you. Yes, you can customize the email. It has full token support. You can send HTML emails out of the box. It just works. You can't do file attachments. You have to add modules to send file attachments in the email, which is not that big of a deal. And one thing, any developer doing handlers, I recommend you add a debug feature. I'm not going to enable this debug feature because I would like to show you the remote post. So I'm going to say, okay, we've got email notifications. Now I want to send this to my CRM. I want to track this person. So I click Add Remote Post, and there's a debug handler which will just show you the data. But for our purposes, I'm going to actually send a broken one because I want to show you what happens if it breaks, and it's not a bad thing. I'm going to turn on debugging, and one of the things with the remote post handler is it only sends the form data, the fields that you're creating. By default, that's what it's sending. If you want to send additional metadata like the IP address and the language, you just have to check off and decide. And then you also have the ability to add custom data to this post, like API keys, custom data from your site. And I want to emphasize, this is extendable. This is a plugin, so if you need OAuth authentication to your CRM, you extend this, add your OAuth authentication wrapper, and then it'll probably just work. I'll just demo the remote post from here. Go over to the test tab. Going to hit send. It's going to break. It's going to really break because we don't have internet, but that's okay. It broke, which is fine. I had the debugger turned on. So this stuff's being logged in the background because the debugger's here. I just wanted to show you what's going on. So yes, it didn't, my CRM.com doesn't like us, but this shows you, I like showing the data. It's really simple data going out. It's name value pairs. If you have some nesting, it'll be another level of data. Moving on. Oh wait, I would like to show, I'm sorry. I want to show one other thing. So people familiar with the Webform module will be very familiar with this. Is you can download your results. I'm going to go over to the tab. There's a lot more options available. And there's an ability to save the settings. So for each form, you can have custom download features based on how you want the form. You can even apply global settings. There's this new feature where you can break it down. You can do it as just own in YAML, but I'm going to show the table. I like this feature. One thing is I don't have Excel support out of the box, but Excel likes HTML tables. It actually doesn't destroy them. CSVs it destroys. If you import a CSV into Excel and you have a plus sign before a single element, it's done. It starts calculating things and it won't work. And you can check off this box and it'll actually encode this table to work in Excel, but I really am just doing it to show you how it works. And I have this feature where by default it downloads the file, but I like showing sometimes even for debugging to see the files online. This only works if you have less than 50 records. If you have thousands, it goes into a batch process. But you get a nice little HTML table and you can see all your data that you're going to pull into Excel. And I like this because it helps debugging things a lot. Moving on. So you start to see with this remote post concept that you can front end any backend. It's this concept that like these forms can do anything you want. When I start showing these settings, you can turn off Drupal. You can build forms that the form goes out there, doesn't know anything about Drupal. You change the action to go anywhere you want. If the example I'm working with someone on, they need ridiculously high performance forms. Like we're talking, the number was like 30 million hits per month. And I said, you cannot do that in Drupal. You can build a form, but you can't take that much data, or if you do, it's going to cost a lot of money. Like Pantheon will charge you a lot of money because they love, for the hits. And I was like, what you can do is turn off the submission and use a Node.js MongoDB backend and have all this data go into that backend. And it just opens up a lot of possibilities. And now this is starting to hint to like, what can you customize? And I'm really passionate about this concept. This module ships with reasonable defaults. You don't need to start customizing it when you start using it. You don't have to sit here tweaking hundreds of settings and figuring it out. It just works because it's thought out. And core ships with reasonable defaults for elements, but everything is customizable. It's something I spent a lot of time on to make sure you can go in and tweak any aspect of your form, like your buttons. And I'm going to show some of it because it's really a lot, but there's two ways to do it. You can go into global settings, but I'm going to just focus on the form for now. I think that's fine. In the settings, and to help manage settings, I've added this collapse all so you can kind of open and show, and it actually will remember the state of your details widget, which does help because if you're trying to tweak one setting throughout your site, it'll stay open. And sorry about that. You get really standard stuff. I'm going to walk through these pretty quickly because there's a few that get more interesting. So you can custom messages, the URLs that you're generating for your forms, the exceptions. You can get into the buttons and add, and this gets into an interesting API thing. There's a lot of APIs in the background. There's a generic attributes element in the web. This is for developers. It's just a fascinating little thing. There's a webform_attributes element that allows you to edit attributes. And I'm using it, it's not exposed to people, to build custom attribute elements, but every button gets this ability where you can add custom CSS classes, you can add custom styles, and then you can add custom attributes to the button. So you can even disable, this is a trick where if you wanted to turn off a wizard back button, you just put #access equals false, and that's it, the button's go. And then you're starting to see massive checkboxes, which is just giving you all the nuances that you can do, adjust for a form. One of the big examples here is you can turn off client-side validation. If you don't like HTML5 validation, you check the box off and it's turned off for a form. And I do follow that pattern through where you can go in and globally turn off client-side validation for all forms on your site. And then you get into all these wizard settings and you're going to see this pattern. You see you can customize the wizard buttons. You can do previews. I'm going to get to the one that I really like to show. Someone added this amazing feature. So we're going to at some point have anonymous drafts turned on where it'll just save data as people are going through, and they actually just help me set automatic purging of drafts, which is just awesome. So if you have old stale data, you could say after a month, please just delete it, and it'll go off and automatically delete it during cron. And this is, I love this feature because this is showing you get control of the method of how the form's being submitted, and you can start customizing it. And this actually allows you to point these forms somewhere else. And you can then add custom properties to the form, which means like you can add custom data attributes if you're doing tracking or CS, like anything you need to do. One other feature worth noting is I'm allowing CSS and JavaScript injection You can turn this off, but the idea is you can attach custom CSS to your form. It gives you the ability to do little nuances where if there's a margin issue, you can just put the CSS stuff you want right there. And it gets bundled with the form when you're exporting the config and moving it around, which is the main reason I did it, because I kind of want to keep this stuff together, and I find there is a CSS injection module, but you kind of start distributing all your data all over the place, and it gets harder to manage. And you can also set up global CSS and JavaScript for all your forms. So if you need to tweak a nuance in core, you can do it this way in a UI. Moving on. So how do you extend this module? Well, I think it's worth kind of giving you like what's what in this module and how things are set up. And web forms are config entities. They are exportable. They export into a single file. It takes all the elements and just puts them into YAML. There's some issues there, because if you have editors working on a site and you import a web form, you might overwrite it. And this is something Core is trying to work out with the config management system, which is a little tricky. Submissions are content, so they get exposed to views. You can do whatever you really want with submissions. And then I think a really important thing is to emphasize plugins. So elements are plugins. The handlers that are sending emails, these are all plugins. Even the exporting of the data is a plugin that you can extend and alter and enhance. You can even swap out the plugins, which is a couple of people have done that. They've had some issues with like one of the form elements, and I was like, well, extend and swap in your own class, and they've managed to do that. And hopefully they'll put a recipe out. And then it's really important to emphasize, everything runs through the theme system, so you have opportunities to tweak things if you need to. Hook form alter is your friend here. You can do a lot with it and a lot of custom functionality. And I want to do a time check, because I have enough time. I want to show you something about tests, because I think tests are really important, but I'm not going to show you code or anything specific about a test. I just need to talk about it. So what's a test? And I'm maintaining this massive module, and I've had to think about like what am I really after? And I simplify it. I think this is what I walk away with for a test. A test confirms an expectation. I don't care if it's automated sometimes. If it's written down and it works and you go back to it, that's a valid test. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But I think it's just important to simplify tests, to not get overwhelmed by all these different systems. To be like, I just need to know things work. And there's benefits to that. And this is the simplest test. And this test actually is the first test I wrote for this module, and it's still sitting there in webform test.php. I go to a page and it loads, and it doesn't throw an error. And I think it's important to realize that's what you need to think about when you start building these things. And just to emphasize where I'm going with tests is, you want to confirm your expectations. You want to prevent regressions. That is huge, key thing. So as you're building out your system, you don't break things. They should be repeatable. Automated testing is very important, that you can repeat the test. It's not some random thing. And they need to be maintainable. You need to think about how your tests are going to scale, and how you're going to use them, and be easy to execute. I'm going to demo and show you why I think that's really, really important. And tests provide documentation. Anyone new to Drupal 8, you learn a lot from the tests sometimes, and you have to go and look at it and see what the developer is really planning on. What are they have notes in there, what's broken, what are the conditions they're looking at. And I'm going to show you something with tests. I'm not going to show you a test, like actual code. I want to emphasize that. I'm turning on, so you have to go into your settings.php to say, show me tests in the background. And it'll enable all the test module. And there's a web form test module. And what that module does, and we'll go to the main one, is you're going to see 92 forms are installed. And what these tests are individual small forms that test single pieces of functionality. And what this has allowed me to do is be very fast in helping people with issues or feature, like if they have a bug, I'm able to go in and reproduce it with these forms. An example, this is a form that just does a confirmation message. It doesn't have any elements. You just hit submit, and it generates a custom confirmation at the top. And this is my way of, personally, where I can confirm my expectation that this would work. And there is an automated test that's loading this form. Something else I'm doing with these tests that you're starting to see, and I'm showing this to you because I recommend, if you're doing any custom work with web forms, create some test forms. Export these forms into a test module. Write a simple test that loads the module and tests the custom feature. It makes a huge. This will speed up your process immensely, because first of all, if you've isolated what you're doing, your custom work, And you can automate and know it's going to continue working and help me where I won't break your code, or if I do, you actually can go fix it. And then I also you get into some nuances. Forms get very tricky. Like, I don't have JavaScript testing. JavaScript testing can be very hard. It's introduced in core, but sometimes you just need examples. I mean, core's getting this concept of we need examples. You need examples to work on, to think about when you're going in. And I'm going to show one, because I want to come back. I'm coming back to this location element because I really like this location element. So there's a test for it. And this is what you saw previously. And what this test page is going to start showing us is it actually shows you what's going on in the background. This is the metadata that's being captured. So we've got that. I don't have automated tests on this. It's because I'm calling Google's API and I need an API key. There's no way to write an automated test in this situation. So I've just created this. So, and then the other test here is I'm setting a default value, which I set to the White House, which I did before Trump came into office. And it's showing you that string of text goes out to the Google API and gets the data. And the next one, which this is a fascinating request that came in, it's doing geolocation. Now, I'm showing you this. You're seeing this on this page, that it went out and grabbed, it figured out where we were. Google must have done it with IP, and now it's filled out the address of where this form is being submitted. And this location element has a really cool checkbox where you can hide the element, and what happens is you have forms that are tracking the geolocation of your user. They do get prompted. It's not that, it's for specific cases. If you had someone out in the field doing surveys and you want to just know where they are without asking to fill out the address, this is an amazingly powerful feature where in the background it'll just start collecting the location data and send it to your system. I recommend any developer should turn on this test module and walk through a few of them. And look at how the tests are corresponding to each one of these forms. There is a test-based class. At the top of every test, web form test, you declare the forms you're using, so it helps you know exactly what forms you're looking at when you're running the test. Are we on time? Not bad. Okay. I'm getting close to the end. So what's next? This is really like, where am I going with this module? And these are the 6 things that I kind of want to point out to people and want people to help with and be aware of. Views integration, it's definitely an active thing of getting views working better so you can do custom displays of your data. Rules integration, the rules module is still in alpha, but at some point we need to get rules integration working because I think that can also enhance handlers where you can do conditional logic around your handlers to only do a remote post in this situation. Conditionals, which I brought up, it's going to be an ongoing thing to improve conditionals. Templates, I think it's going to be a really important thing to the web form ecosystem to build out more templates and have people enhance them. One nice thing is like templates are copied, so we can keep improving the templates. If someone goes into the donation form template and they're like, well, it doesn't work, this isn't a great example, let's improve it. Perfectly fine. We can keep improving these templates because it's not going to overwrite someone's system. They're imported already, but we can kind of extend those. Third-party integration, I think, is a huge thing in the web form community, and more people are going to have to start contributing modules to get better integration with CRMs and Google. I would love to see a module push data to Google Sheets. There is a module out there for Webform 7, and I would like to see that brought over. And the UI and UX experience I want to significantly improve. I think it's going to coincide with what core is doing. So there's a lot of initiatives to improve core. There's a system tray concept where you go to edit an element instead of a dialog, it opens up in the right-hand sidebar. And it's a very common feature and it works much better in mobile. And finally, there's a big challenge that I'm working on is getting field API integration. The web form, and I don't want to get too far into this, but the web form stores data in a very simple, it's called an entity attribute value table. It's a very simple table to capture lots and lots and lots of data. This is the ongoing debate in web forms is it can handle a ridiculous amount of data, and Field API has some limitations. Field API, a web form can handle like 300 elements populating, easily. To have a node with 300 fields on it, I think you're going to hit a performance bottleneck. It can't handle it. But I'm trying to work out some system where there's some integration with the web form module, because Field API is this core system to collect data, and one goal would be to have a way where some data can go into Field API, because then you can manipulate it. Because in a lot of the cases when you have a form with 300 fields on it, you only really need 20 or 30 of those fields to be in core in a rich system where you might want to do filtering or querying or statistics on it. So some conclusions that I kind of want to wrap up. The Webform module allows you to quickly build forms that are flexible and completely yours. The flexibility I want to emphasize in the completely yours. You can really build anything, and it's really important for you to realize that they're yours. These are your forms. This is your data. This is your system. You can tweak it to your heart's content. And that's, I think what I'm saying is it's really the power of Drupal. I mean, Drupal is flexible and completely yours. Does it have the best UI? Probably not. But it's so powerful. It just gives you possibilities, especially when you're meeting clients and you're talking to them. You can be like, I can do anything you want. So there's a final picture, because it is Drupal on the open source side of things. So yes, the Webform module is open source. It's free. You should contribute. I've seen many presentations. Every presentation seems to end on this note. And I was like, wow, I get tired of that. But then after doing all this work in this space and working so hard, I'm like, no, it's really important to say to people, you should contribute to this module. You should contribute some effort. You should find a way to help people move this stuff forward. It doesn't happen unless people get involved. Even if you're filing tickets, it makes a huge difference. So contribute to the community. And thanks. And that's my dog, Ralph. Thank you. I hope I didn't talk too fast. I've hit my time point, but I got 10 minutes for questions. And I'll start repeating questions. So I'm going to go from bottom to top.
So first, just want to say thanks for all your work on YAML Form / Webform. We use it at my company. We really like it. Your creativity and passion for the subject really comes through in the final product. I particularly like the videos that you've scattered throughout. My question is about the wizard system. I just wondered what the sort of what technical strategy you used for persisting data across multiple screens.
So with this model, it's a completely new code base, but when I moved, as I was working on it, I kept looking at web forms, because it's amazing what QuickSets did with it. It's so inspiring. So I followed their pattern, which is you're using Core's wizard pattern, where the data always posts back to the server, and each form page is it's a reload, it's a rebuild of the form. There's a core issue here that's a real drag, is if you hit the back button, you're done. It kills you. It loses the data. But it's basically forms being reposted to itself, and it keeps tweaking the UI. It keeps moving it forward, and you can save the data in the background, because you're hitting the server every time. I think within the next year to 2 years, this whole wizard system is going to have to be rethought and become all client-side. I think it's going to have to happen. There's going to have to be JavaScript on the front end that will Ajaxify the form, and you'll move through, and it'll do Ajax posts to save the data. Did that answer your question? And I didn't repeat your question, sorry. Do better.
So yeah, partially. I guess I figured that it was a back-end storage.
But you are bringing up a point. But local, see, there's opportunities now that we need to think about local storage for storing data. I mean, by the way, that's JavaScript plugins that you can just add to your system. I use local storage like crazy now.
Say
local storage. I'm storing the state of every details on the local storage. You can do tons of amazing stuff. More questions? I'll go up there.
Thank you, Jacob. It's an amazing module. Thanks for bringing it to DrupalCamp. I have a very simple question. There must be imposters out there. How do you distinctly know that this is your module when you go to download it off of Drupal.org?
What do you mean?
A lot of times when I'm downloading modules, there's different variations thereof. So how can I distinctly tell that it's your module?
Well, I'm definitely the maintainer of the Webform 8.0 version, and I've gone out of my way. You can see even the first slide is 8.x-5.x, because I want to emphasize, there was a debate, what's the version number? We decided that Webform 7.0 is going to stay in about the 4.x branch, probably indefinitely until it moves to backdrop. So that's the key distinguishing thing. It's the version number of the module. That's what you have to look for, and you got to just use Drupal.org. You don't go to any other site. Yeah. Use Drush and Drupal.org. Well, I need to rephrase that. Wow, things have changed. Use Drupal.org, Drush, and Composer. One of those options, because now Composer is another way to get these modules.
Thanks. Just backing up, because I'm new to the Forms module. Drupal has the ability to catch the particular browser that's being sending the information. Is that correct?
It's a great question. No, I didn't do that. You need to file a queue. If you want that, you just need to file it, and we'll create an element for it.
I saw your IP. That's the reason I was asking.
Oh, I'm capturing the IP, but you know, I've been avoiding like that. The browser stats I've avoided a little bit because I think Google Analytics and Tag Manager can do a lot of awesome stuff in the background. I kind of was feeling that that would be something someone else, some other module would step in. I've added all those ability to add attributes because that helps significantly with tagging, like Google tagging and figuring, you know, like you're like capturing your data. But I haven't captured the browser data. I just decided because it's not, the IP address is important for tracking. If someone's spamming the hell out of you, you need to know that. Knowing whether they're on IE or Safari, it didn't seem relevant. But it's an easy feature to add. I mean, it's, you know, I bet you there's a Webform module for 7 that does that because people must have been curious. More questions? Sure.
I don't have a question, just a comment that in case you want to do some live demo, I'm told that the internet is back here.
Oh, I'm glad I didn't burn myself on that one. Like, I just.
Yeah, you back out. Very good.
Yeah, no, you just have to go with it. You're just like, darn, okay. I can't show you. I mean, it was documentation. Any other questions? Go.
I might be behind the times on this, but I noticed when you edited the YAML, you had syntax highlighting in the browser. I don't think I've ever had that. Is that something you did? Like,
Yes, I'll even show you. Okay. So yes, I'm using CodeMirror, and if you turn on the Webform development module, I really broke things down. I'm just showing you something that I'm kind of goofily proud of. Is okay, I'm going to go into the config synchronization system. This is how you manage your configuration, import, export. And I'm showing this because I want to show, okay, I actually, I'm about to cry. Because it's, oh wait, I just did it wrong. I got nervous. Single item. So I added CodeMirror to the export just so you get a nice, pretty, you go export, and you get your nice little pretty IDE looking code. And then if you go into your web forms, you get, it tidies them, which is kind of, by the way, I like showing this because this shows you all the data that, this is a form. This is it. It's all in one single file, and it's all broken down into nice little well-named elements, and here's your form. And these are literally every setting. And I personally, you know, I'm a developer. I go in and edit this sometimes. I don't go to the UI. It's just easier because I'm using features heavily to pull these forms out and pull them back in. That's it.
So what was the name of the
CodeMirror. It's really, with IDEs there's two. It's CodeMirror. I'm using CodeMirror because it's lighter weight. And there's another one called ACE that people are starting to use, and they're starting to build modules to add those to the site. So if you do anything with YAML, it's really important. And there's a lot of underlying APIs. So there's a dedicated webform _ CodeMirror element that integrates this, and you can actually use that in your, you can use that API in your projects, and it does validation too. So it'll validate this YAML if it's incorrect in the background. Any other questions? Well, thank you. That was